Welcome to the Counter Press. This week's episode I'm super excited about one of my best friends in the industry and a fellow lover of football. If this is your first episode of the Counter Press, you are in the right place. This is a discussion about the glorious game of football, soccer if you're in America or Australia, but football for everybody else. And I do this discussion with people who are in the world of logistics and trade, global trade. So this is not ground rules. This is not a supply chain podcast. This is not a logistics podcast. This is not a technology podcast. This is a football podcast through the eyes of the people in the industry that I know and I speak to day to day for my day job, which is as an editor at the Journal of Commerce. So a word of caution here. I am a writer and a talker. I'm not a production wizard. So you're going to have to bear with me as I learn the ropes of how producing a high quality podcast actually works. But you're my guinea pigs, and hopefully the quality of the discussion overcomes whatever technical inadequacies I have at the beginning. So with all that said, I am super excited to bring on Brian Glick, who is the CEO of a company called Chain.io. Brian, I think you and I've watched more football with you on TV or in person than anybody else besides my son. Maybe I'm trying to think of someone else. I don't even have that many friends who I've watched it with. I tend to be like a solo viewer or a viewer of with my son. So you're in the lead as far as I can remember.
I think there may be people in the industry who think you and I are dating because we sneak away from conferences from time to time.
To go to
To go
games
to
or to watch
matches.
them in
Yeah.
part. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Uh, yeah, just to set the record straight, we both have families, so we don't
We
want to
do.
be putting any we just are nerd out
We're
on
just going to leave that at that.
yeah, we just nerd out on football like we nerd out on technology. So all right, give people who don't know who you are before we get into what we're supposed to be talking about. Who are you? What do you do? What's Chain.io?
So I'm Brian. I'm the founder, CEO at Chain. Spent about the last 25 years or so in customs compliance and shipping and tech, and built a tech company to do all of the really awful plumbing that has to happen between companies so that people don't have to type data from system to system over and over again. And given that this is a football podcast, I will leave it right there. Um,
Yes.
and and that is enough of the industry stuff. And I am also a Barca supporter, which I'm so sure we will discuss. And I, as of a couple of months ago, live here in Barcelona. So that's if you don't show, if there's no other proof of dedication to a team, it's I grew up in Philadelphia and I live in Barcelona
Well, we will get into that for sure.
now.
Yeah, I so all right, let's maybe take things back, right? When so a lot of people, I'm not one of these people, started becoming a supporter of the beautiful game as a child, or their parent, sort of indoctrinated them into it, whatever. When did you start first appreciating the game? What's your earliest memory of like, oh, I
Well,
love this?
I didn't appreciate the game when I played it as a very little kid because I was awful and I don't have an athletic bone in my body. So that was forced torture by my parents
Fair.
for a year maybe, and then I managed to kind of out stubborn them. And then I remember watching a little bit of the game during the World Cup in the U.S. in the '90s, but it didn't really stick for me. I found it interesting and intriguing, but I didn't understand it, and I was still at the phase of I don't understand why they go backwards so much.
Yeah.
And and then the problem in the U.S. was you had the World Cup and then nothing. I think when the women's team became good is when I really got into the game. Was actually watching U.S. women's national team, and then
Yeah. That was like late
that
90s,
evolved.
like the
Yeah,
Brandy
very
Chest.
late '90s, the
Yeah.
Mia Hamm,
Yeah.
Brandy Chastain era,
Yeah.
and then it was actually kind of more available because they were winning regularly and there was interest in what they were doing outside of the major tournaments. And then and then it wasn't until about 2011, 2010ish that I really kind of developed a passion for the game, which came from actually visiting Barcelona, going to Camp Nou, and also the apartment that my wife and I lived in Philadelphia at the time was diagonal across the street from an Irish pub, and they would open up very early on the weekends for EPL. And my wife became a Tottenham supporter because it was a Tottenham bar. I don't get up that early on the weekends.
Congrats to her, by the way.
Yeah, so I would wander in. I would wander in a little bit later and catch the Spanish matches because they started a more sensible time,
Yep.
and that was really how I kind of developed my love for Barca.
So, okay, congrats to your wife for the most successful, ridiculously terrible season of all time. I mean, there is a phrase of being Spursy, right? Like of kind of failing at the last moment. This is the
Mhm.
counter opposite. This is like an abjectly terrible team actually winning their first major trophy in
Yes.
forever, and somehow failing upward into the Champions League, like a dopey
Yeah.
white male in corporate America, getting promotion after promotion despite failing at every single thing he does.
I'm
But
assuming you're not describing the owner of the team there. So
what was that?
you're not describing the owner of the team there with your
No, no,
failing.
no. I mean, they're a successful club by any definition, right? They don't
Yes,
win
yes.
trophies, but like, yeah. But this year, come on. I mean, what a catastrophe! Like, what a ridiculous
It was yeah,
circumstance.
it was, it's, I'm kind of a believer actually in, I like coaches who have a commitment, even if it's psychotic.
Yeah, like an
Right.
identity
I
of
like,
interest
I
with you.
genuinely,
Yeah,
I don't like things that are boring and, I'm going to be the 58th coach that tries to be Pep, right?
right,
Like,
right.
you know what I mean? Like go be yourself and live and die by it. And I respect that at
Well, he
least.
lived and died by it.
Yeah,
So
exactly. At the same time, simultaneously,
same
same
time,
week.
at the same time. Yeah,
You know?
yeah. Um, well, I don't want to dwell too much on Spurs because I'm sure at some point I
Fair.
will have someone like Simon K on or someone to talk about from
Yes.
their perspective. Um, so all right, time frame is beginning of the 2010s. You're watching Spanish football. What drew you? Okay, I mean, I kind of know what drew you to Barcelona. I was not a Barcelona fan like literally the 2009 Champions League final sort of opened my eyes to what the sport could be. I had become a huge football fan from the late 90s after the 98 World Cup, and I was absolutely in love with the game and could not stop watching and caring about it. But that final, like it's sort of like it was almost like you realized football was like five-dimensional as opposed to like two-dimensional, and it just changed my whole view of like how I watched the sport because it was the excellence but also just the way that they played was and the way that Pep like sort of challenged them to be play the way they did. I can't even really necessarily put it into words because I'm not like a tactical genius or anything like that. But I could see with my eyes this was not the sport that I'd watched for the last 10 years. So you come in a little bit after that, right?
Like a little bit after that, but I actually came in from the other angle. I
Okay.
had visited Barcelona as a city
Okay.
in 2000, let's call it 3 or 4, for just as a tourist, right? And fell in love with the city. So
Yeah.
then when I decided, like I just made a conscious decision, I'm going to start watching football. I was like, well, what's my favorite place in Europe? I'll just root for that team. So I came into it not knowing that I had picked a super club. That was, and nobody believes this, right? My
Yeah.
wife
Yeah.
doesn't believe this either, right? She was there and she doesn't believe it. But like I was like, no, I did this tour from Amsterdam to Madrid. It was a bus tour. I visited all these places, and that Barcelona was the place I just really fell in love with it.
Just calls
And
to you. Yeah.
yeah, and so I was like, I'll root for their team. I didn't know Espanol was a thing at the time, so it's an easier to sit, thankfully. And so I went to that, and then I watched them, and when you start by watching Barca, you learn a game differently than if you start by watching EPL, right?
Sure.
And I know there's more of that theoretically in EPL now because of Pep, but like you watch a game and you listen to the announcers and they're talking about different things and they're talking more about the strategy. There's just there's kind of a thing to it, um, and so I was taught to enjoy the game the way it's played here, and then there's a poetry to it, and there's you can say you're a fan of Brazilian football. You can say you're a fan of Spanish football. You can say you're a fan of English football. I guess theoretically, and
Dutch, Dutch,
yeah, Dutch,
the countries
right?
and clubs that have
And you
identities.
know what that means, right? Italian football means a different thing, and I don't know whether I would have naturally gravitated to the Spanish style of football, but because I was sort of raised in it from a football standpoint, it just seems right to me. And everything else kind of just seems slightly off or not as much, not as beautiful a beautiful game, right?
What's if you can like sort of watch from above yourself and say, what is
Mhm.
the thing about football that like makes you keep coming back to it, that you think about it too much, that what's that thing you think?
So it is so fluid and complex. And the fact that you can never actually understand what's going on in the pitch completely, like nobody can, right? I mean, even Messi, right? Like, or Xavi or somebody like that. They still can't fully understand in every moment everything that's happening, and yet it can work. And coming out of US sports, the other thing is just the absolute there is no moment where something couldn't happen, right? There's no break. There's so much fluidity to the game that you have to watch. I mean, you can watch it two ways, right? You can either wait for the goals or you can watch every moment knowing this could be the moment that the one thing happens that decides the match.
Hmm.
And that like I just love that intensity that it brings to you as a fan when you know that, as opposed to say the NBA, like any particular moment in the NBA doesn't matter because you have 50, 60 scoring
Right.
chances per team per game. In football, one guy puts one foot down wrong and he slips and the game's over and the season's over, right? And you get relegated, right? Like that's intensity.
You're calling out Steven Gerrard already?
I am
Yeah.
not.
No.
I am just saying those things happen, right? And they happen the other way too,
Oh, of
right? Like
course. Yeah.
the one guy who, has never scored a goal in his career and then,
Yeah.
happens to have the ball bounce off his back or something. And the next thing you know,
He's a hero.
he's the hero for all time for
Yeah.
getting the team promoted, right? So,
Yeah. I think they're one of the reasons I think that the current youth generation, so my son is 12 and and all his friends are obsessed. Like we had an end of year school party yesterday, and every single boy was wearing some European football shirt. Um, and 15 years ago, that same group would have been wearing NFL jerseys and NBA jerseys. And so there's something to it that's grabbed it. And I think the the sort of always on nature of or never off nature of it, I think has sort of like people have started to embrace that, as opposed to I need to see a certain amount of scoring. It's actually, no, I love the fact that this game just keeps going and you have to figure things out on the fly, and you don't get to like the amount of overcoaching in American sports where timeouts are called and coaches get involved and set this thing up to happen in this exact moment. It was suffocating the game, essentially. It's suffocating all of these sports, and you don't have
mhm.
that in football. In football, it's aside from a water break in summer where it's too hot, or an injury, you have 30-40 minutes where if your weak link is getting exposed, 11
Uh,
collectively need to figure that out. You can't go home to mom and figure it out. So I don't know. I don't know if kids appreciate that or if it's just that more of games are on TV. But I mean, I think there is something that like people have fundamentally started to understand what it is that's great about the sport, and they're not consumed too much with the scoring.
So there's another piece to this, and I think it probably applies to the kids, but it applies to me in a little bit of a different angle, which is video games.
Oh yeah, for
So
sure.
the
FIFA,
game formerly known as FIFA,
FC
uh,
now, FC. Yeah,
right? Which I haven't actually played in a number of years, but like I played it before I watched the game
a
regularly
lot of kids
because
did.
it was like the best sports game, right?
It was
It was
most
Madden and
realistic.
FIFA. Those were like the two that were,
Yeah,
and but like you could play FIFA and not because it's video gaming, like you didn't really have to fully understand the game, but it would teach you some of the kind of like, oh, I do need to pass the ball back. Like I can't just,
formations.
yeah,
Oh yeah, I
you know,
can't play. I
like I
can't
have
play
to
six
understand what
foot.
a 4-4-2 is and a four
Yeah,
three three and what have you. But then during the pandemic or just before it, I got really into Football Manager,
I
which
know
is
this. I was going to
like,
ask you about
yeah,
this. This
yeah,
is
yeah.
yeah,
So Football Manager takes it to a whole nother level, right? Because for anyone who doesn't know what Football Manager is, it's the most intense simulation. You don't actually play the game like FIFA. You coach, like you are just on the sidelines
yeah.
setting
You're the manager.
formations,
You're the manager.
players, salary caps, training regimens, and it'll consume your life. I recommend staying away from it unless you have a massive amount of
There,
free
I think
time.
there actually are like forums in the UK for like marriages that have broken
Oh
down
yeah, yeah.
Football Manager. So
So, but
yeah,
because that game is so intense, like you have to set your formations and individual instructions for every player. And like, do you want them to favor their left foot and right foot and pass in this situation and run in this? Because I was playing that game, I learned that next level. I learned how to see, okay, so if you're, if you have a right, like I understand now that like how Pep has changed from having a flanking like winger that comes up the side to now with Man City, he plays with an inverted wing back and how that creates stability in the center. And
and
when you create
overloads.
stability in the center and the overloads and this and that and the
Yeah,
other, and
yeah.
and really like I know when they say that the players in the space, like what that means, all of that comes from Football Manager and from building tactics and really kind of and playing with like fifth tier English teams and learning the pyramid and knowing the promotion rules and picking random teams all over the world. And like I took St. Pauli to win the Champions League one time
I
in a
should have. My
game.
son has the
Yeah,
St. Pauli shirt. You
there you
can't do
go.
logistics and go to Hamburg and not pick up the brown St. Pauli shirt.
That
So,
that is fair. And so that brought a whole nother layer of understanding for an American who didn't grow up at the game, where honestly, I think compared to even many of my European friends, I understand those intricacies better
oh yeah,
from playing Football Manager than they do getting drunk and screaming at somebody because they're
watch.
wearing the wrong color
Well,
jersey, right?
there's those emotional attachments that don't let you like be rational about
I'm
anything.
not going to say that's all Liverpool supporters.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
saying it
It's a lot
happens.
of them. I on the management piece, and I'm not comparing myself to any sort of like professional manager, but I think understanding the game at various levels gives so much satisfaction. So over the winter, this past winter, my son is in a like an academy. He's low level. I have no false illusions about him one day being professional, but there's a break in the winter where they play futsal, but to give him a little more time, we signed up for a winter league that was like an indoor 7-a-side winter league. Well, turns out I get roped into coaching this league, coaching this team. And for the most part, I'm just like following what the actual managers have done with these kids. I keep them in their same place. But you have to figure things out. Anyway, last game of the season, we had played the best club in this little mini league, like third straight time in a row, just because that's how it worked. And they were kicking our heads in just like they'd done the last two games. And it dawned on me in the sixth half of the match we were playing that I started to see how they have all their moves were triggered, right? They passed to a wide center, one of the defender who usually passed inside to a guy like a deep lying midfielder who everything ran through him. I don't know, because I'm not a professional manager. It took me 6 halves to figure this out, but I figured it out, and I stationed a guy directly on him, and I said, I don't care if you don't touch the ball for this half. You are shadowing him. He's not touching the ball either. And that second half, we didn't give up a goal that second half. And even though we lost like 12-1 that game, I felt this like weird
good
sense of satisfaction. It was like when if you score 120 in golf, but you have one amazing shot that you feel makes you look like a professional golfer. It's like, that's why I'm going to come back. So yeah, like understanding those little chess pieces is a big part of like that, like progressing as a fan. What's your most controversial opinion on football?
You told me this in advance. I should have a list, but I'll give you the first one off
Give
first.
me everything you
You can
got.
tell
You
me
don't
how
have to
deep you want to
stay
go.
till just one.
I believe that players should have a FIFA enforced minute cap for the calendar year or for a 365 day period.
Oh my gosh, I'm not even sure.
Obviously, this will never happen because
This
it
is
costs
amazing.
money. Because it would cost teams money. But these stupid, the Club World Cup, right? Like these stupid. There's 4 matches for the Super Copa in Spain now. The FA Cup and and the other tournaments and this and that. It's like you should have your country tournament, your Open, your league, Champions League or Europa League, and then the clubs should need to be done to make room for international play because it's not fair to the health of the players. And I know the more money comes in, the players get paid more money, whatever, but it shouldn't be like that. And that's my first step to becoming Spanish is everyone needs to work less.
It would also work in France.
Also would work in France.
Yes.
I also believe that elimination matches should have golden goal because I think it's more exciting, and I think you've already played the 90. And I maybe that's an American thing, but I like golden goal for elimination matches. And I think that the player, this one's probably less controversial, but I think the player who's nearest to the ball or touches it first must take the throw in, and there should be no more of this. Oh, I picked up the ball and then I realized I'm not the wing back and I want to hand it. It's time wasting and it's stupid and it's obnoxious. So those are the top 3.
I think so. I think the first one is one of those things that probably every single football fan who cares about like that the best players stay as healthy as possible could not possibly disagree with. But of course, it's like Peter Pan stuff. Like
Right.
the money drives everything. So, I mean, I'm part of the problem. I'm going to the Club World Cup match, so I'm just glad Barca's not involved. So like they're gonna rest and Madrid have to play more matches. Not that Madrid played particularly hard this year, so they need to sharpen things up a little bit. So
fair enough. Are you baiting me?
No, I mean you know where I stand on those 2 teams. So interesting. Okay, the throw in. I think there's some problems with throw in. I'm not sure having the person who was closest to the ball is necessarily going to like expedite things anymore.
Well, I think
maybe just a timer.
logical
timer.
Well, that's the logical next step, right? Is what they're doing next year with the goalkeepers, where there's going to be like a real timer there. And I mean, we watched it works in baseball, right?
Totally.
They make the game go faster, and
everyone said for years it won't work, and it actually works great.
Yeah,
so.
There's no reason that you should not be able to pick the ball up and get it back into play without the other one. They walk like 10 yards up.
Well, that's to me that's the bigger problem. If you think that like territorial like progression is actually a really important thing, and where activity takes place and where transitions and turnovers take place, when a guy gets the ball and starts slowly frog stepping, halfway up to the halfway line, and the ref is like allows it up until a certain point, and then he's like, okay, you pushed it too far. Like, I mean, it's not that hard. They find the exact blade of grass to take a free kick 35 yards out, but a guy can literally move like 15 yards up if he's in his own half taking a throw in. It makes absolutely no sense at all.
There's a lot of things in the game where I think the officials think we don't want to disrupt the flow of the game, so we're not going to call this. But what they don't address, and actually hockey officials are very good at this, if you address it right away and you do it consistently, then the behavior stops, right? So yeah, so if you have to stop and throw a yellow card once, you're not going to see that again
I'm
for the
not
rest
gonna
of the
see it
season.
again.
Like it'll be just be first week, one of the leagues comes out and says yellow card for moving more than, you get one warning and then you get a yellow card if you move more than 3 yards from where the ball went out. A couple yellow cards, that's going to be done,
So
right? Like it'll just be done forever.
are you advocating that like the goons on each side just have a brawl in the middle, like in hockey too, just to
Uh,
settle things?
that's only in the Classico.
I mean, well, yeah, that used to be a common occurrence in the 70s. Like that
Yes,
was,
yes. No.
normal course of business. I just forgot my controversial thing that I wanted to see. Oh, it'll come to me.
I'll fire one more at you.
Yeah, go for it.
The women's international game is a superior on the field product to the men's international game.
I don't necessarily disagree. I think the problem with the women's game relative to the men's game is the variability now between the best women's national teams and the worst is way too big, and you get too many games where there's not a competitive game, whereas
Yeah, but
every
that's
game in
changing.
a men's game is now competitive. Yeah, it will change. It will change.
You
Well,
say that,
that's
but
assuming
watch the group
every,
stage of the World Cup. Watch the group stage of the men's World Cup and tell me that every game is competitive.
well, it's more competitive now than it was 30 years ago.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
Saudi Arabia
when
just World
Panama
Cup
has to,
champion.
yeah, well, and the U.S. can lose to Finland on the right day, right?
Finland's
Like,
better than the U.S.
right. So maybe not, right? But no, I'm talking about in the women's game.
Oh,
Right?
in the women's
But
game.
like,
Yeah.
but like, my point being that like, if you look at what's happening in Spain, you look at what's happening in England, you look at the generation that's growing up now, where like one of the things I learned moving here is like they don't like when Barca puts out their stuff, it's not the men's and the women's, it's the football
It's
Barca,
the
it's
club.
FC Barcelona,
The
right?
club.
It's the club,
Basketball,
and
women's, whatever it is.
and you see not as many, but you see men the weekend after they win in kits, right? Like
Yeah.
the girls that are coming up now in Europe have the same passion that the girls in the US had 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're not shamed for it. So that gap is, and I think the U.S. women's team knows this very well, has closed already. Like the tournaments are competitive again, and certainly I don't think that there's a world where you're going to ever see a World Cup where there's a lock winner like there was a few years
Oh
ago.
yeah, no. Or even, I mean, yeah, I think with this generation, it's always Spain's or England's to lose, but it wouldn't be surprising to see like a bunch of different countries win in a way that you could go into a tournament and say there's only 3 teams that can even win this. So no, I agree. I remember watching a few years back, and I had just watched a US men's national team game, and then I watched the women's, and I was like, it's not even about the athletic difference. It's they're more skilled. They have a better idea of what they want to do when they're in a certain place on the pitch, and I was like, this is just frankly much preferable to watch. Like,
and I also think they play harder.
it's probably
Not like in a final, but I find that the women will bring the intensity that the professional men's players bring to international matches and group stages is not the same as the women.
Yeah.
Right? It just isn't. It's another one of 100 matches they're playing, and I get it, and it's the whole thing. But like the women, they don't dive, they don't look for cheap calls, they don't complain to the ref. They get out there, they play tactically strong football, and they all play hard. Every one of them on the pitch, and I think it's a better. And again, as someone who isn't watching the match for like I want to see amazing individual physical feats of like I jumped, this high in the air and did a backflip and a bicycle kick and everything. Like, I love watching women's football.
Well, again, you're in the right city.
Yes.
The Champions League final, notwithstanding by the slimmest margin. All right, you mentioned it, but let's get into it. Your favorite team is Barcelona.
Mhm.
That has not changed, I assume.
Correct.
Okay. Do you have like other teams? Where do you stand on like supporting multiple teams like in different leagues?
So I have other teams I enjoy watching. St. Pauli being one of them. Um, I actually, and this will, highly controversial. I actually really enjoy watching Atletico Madrid. I like the way they play.
How about
So
Getafe?
they still play? Are they professional in
Borderless.
there? So
Borderless.
sorry. Just no, and I mean, and I've never really gotten into the Italian game, and I wouldn't say I have a rooting interest in anyone in England in particular. There's players I like here and there, but I don't watch much of it. So I would say I watch a lot of German and a lot of Spanish football, and then I do enjoy watching South American club football when it's on generally because I've walked into some sort of restaurant and they have it on, and
Yeah.
I think it's great and I love the energy. Will not say that I would take a side in any of the anything that'll get you stabbed down there,
Yeah,
but
no. You gotta have to
like,
be conscientiously neutral.
but yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, for me, Barca, Spanish national team, that's really is where it's at for me. Um, some of the teams
Who is your favorite player of all time?
okay, so there's a thing on Reddit, if you're in the Barca subreddit, when Messi was on the team, there was an acronym OTM, which was man
Other
of the match other than Messi, right?
other
You
than
had to,
Messi.
because every match you wanted to have an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna favorite player other than Messi, right?
I think
And
that's
it's
fair. Yeah,
yeah,
favorite human being player.
favorite human being. Okay, Sergio Roberto. I'm
Sergi
coming up.
Roberto.
He's my favorite player other than Messi.
That is a controversial take.
That is a
Okay.
controversial take, and I'm
Explain.
gonna I'm
Explain.
gonna tell you exactly why he is my favorite player other than Messi.
La Remontada? Is that why?
The man played 375 matches across 14 years for Barcelona, and he sacrificed his career because the team did not have a right back, and he went back there and did that job for seasons as a natural midfielder. He came up, he did what the club needed him to do. He was a good midfielder who probably could have evolved into a very good midfielder, right? Like a midfielder who could have been sold for $30 million to
Sure.
somebody
Yeah.
given the opportunity. And instead, he went and he stood back there and he got his ass handed to him over and over and over again while he learned the position and while all the fans said how awful he was. And he played 14 seasons for the club, 375 matches
He was
on some of
captain.
the best teams ever. And to sit, for a guy to be in the club, like his meaningful years was 2013 to 2024 to be in Barcelona and manage to maintain about 35 to 45 matches per season on those teams, you can't tell me a guy's not a good player. And
Yep.
his ability is to sacrifice his personal. You go tell. I won't even pick on a Real player, right? You go tell Neymar that he's got to go play left back for half a season because the club needs it, and see what happens, right?
So I have a very distinct. I'm gonna get the year wrong, uh,
Hmm.
but I have a very my favorite Sergi Roberto memory is. Do you remember the year Barca lost the title this year? They but they beat Madrid. It's the goal where I think it's the goal where Messi takes his shirt off and holds it in front of the
Hmm.
Bernabeu, right? The last minute goal. Jordi Alba does his trademark cutback. Messi runs onto it, curves it from outside in like the most messy possible goal you could possibly
Right.
score. Uh, it was all triggered by Sergio Roberto picks the ball up in the near the corner flag, his own corner flag, plays a 1-2 with someone I forget, literally outruns the entire Madrid team, lays it off to Jordi Alba,
Right.
which created the thing. And you only ever see like the pass and the goal and the celebration. You don't see the 8 seconds of winning the ball, getting yourself, extricating yourself out of this situation, outrunning everybody, gliding through a couple people, laying it off. Yeah, he
And
tended to score like kind of key goals and make key contributions. He wasn't just fading into the background.
no, he wasn't. But he was sort of everyone's favorite whipping boy
He was a
because
whipping
he
boy
would
because he
get
wasn't good enough.
turned.
He wasn't
He
good
would
enough
get
for the
he
rest of
would
the
get
team.
shown on the playing right back. When he was in the midfield, he was fine, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's one of those things where that's a dedication to club that you have to come up with a club to have that kind of dedication,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And players like that, and there are players like that on nearly every mid or bottom table club in the world, right? The players that don't get the kind of they don't get the glory, they don't get their own shoe, but that do that for 15 years at a mid-table club, some of whom get the offer and don't take it, right?
Yeah.
And never get, but they, you see it all the time with, with Atletico Bilbao um,
Yeah.
um, players who don't leave, right? And part of me really hopes Nico doesn't leave,
I know.
right? Because I think I mean, I would never begrudge him for doing it,
Yeah.
but especially the way that he and his brother have sometimes been treated by the home fans, like, there's, I wouldn't say he's a bad person if he decides to leave, but there's something very special about
Yeah.
having
Being in
that
that
kind of
club
dedication.
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Do you have a favorite like year? Like Spanish national team, Barcelona, or some other team? Do you have a favorite like
Well,
club for a year?
14, 15 Barca, MSN's first year.
14. Oh, the treble.
Yeah, the treble.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Second treble.
that team was just, like you know, forget even the front three. I mean, that team was just insane, right?
They brought
And they
Xavi off
were
the bench
so much fun to watch. Yeah.
because he
I
was at the
mean,
end of his career. Yeah.
you had Jordi Alba, you had
Rakitic.
Iniesta, you had Xavi, you had Rakitic coming in, you had the MSN, you had PK, you had Ter Stegen fighting Bravo to kind of get in there even, right? And then you had players like, it was Pedro's last year with the team. It was, the one of my favorite players who left and then had one of these careers and still having one is Mark Bartra was on that team,
Yeah, I love that guy.
and then
I
has
actually love
become
that
just
guy.
a solid,
Yeah.
La Liga defender. He was the young guy on that team,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think
I
there's
played a
reports.
lot. I played him a lot in FIFA.
Yeah, there you go.
Like someone
Yeah.
was always getting injured in the back line, and he played a lot of minutes for me in FIFA that year. So do you remember that year? I remember that year quite clearly because that was Luis Enrique's first year,
Hmm.
his first treble that he won. Now he's on a double treble. Uh, he was in a bit of trouble during the winter break. They were playing, they were scuffling, they were dropping points. I think Madrid had even maybe either caught up to them or passed them, and they hadn't won in 14. And it was starting to be like, oh, is this the end of this era? And there were talks about like, is Luis Enrique over his head? And then I don't think they lost after the new year, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
and then there was also this, like, all of this kind of griping, because he introduced just a tiny bit of verticality
Yeah, more vertical. Totally. Yes.
I mean, and it was, they certainly were not, playing,
It wasn't Route
this,
One. It
yeah, it
wasn't.
wasn't Route One. It wasn't, they were not doing that, but there was a little bit of if you see a guy up there, you can send the ball
You
up
have
to him
you have
and try to
maybe
score.
the three of the four best forwards in the world. Maybe get them on the ball. That was
Yeah,
like
exactly, exactly. There was a bit of that, and I know and it's sort of, just the people who think they know things were just out of their minds. We're abandoning the principles of who we are, and actually, it's one of the things I love about Barca is not I'd rather lose the right way, but I certainly don't want to win the wrong way,
right, right,
right?
right. Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. That the writing about the like club and the institution is like Sid Lowe, who I'm sure you read a lot,
Mhm.
is like one of the best Spanish.
I refer to you occasionally as the Sid Lowe of logistics.
Oh, that's like
So,
literally the highest
there you go.
compliment you can pay me because he's literally my favorite reporter in the whole world, but or writer. He talks about how like this dogmatic that you have to play this like Cruyffian way, even if you lose and even if the team is not suited to it, is like totally a little bit, not totally, but a little bit overblown. Like obviously there's been tactical tweaks throughout Barca's history. They've not always played, the same 4-3-3, and you can't change it, and everybody has to fit into that. Like you get some of the most talented players who've ever played the game, you adjust to what they do well. Like what are we talking about here?
Yes, yes, and but it is
Has to
not.
be possession. Has to be
It's
possession based.
but it's not. Well, and it's not even that it has. To me, it's not even that it has to be possession. It has to be quality football, right?
Right. Entertaining. Entertaining.
It has to be football that is played by intelligent footballers who are doing the intelligent things on the pitch. To me, that
That's
is
fair.
more like even and I think we've seen it this year, right? Where one of the things Hansi Flick understands is sometimes the intelligent thing to do on the pitch is to hoof it down the field at any given moment so that you don't let the other team's press,
Suffocate.
like it loosens the press, right?
Yeah.
And it's, certainly if you play this game and you watch this happen to the Spanish national team, you play the exact same predictable way, even if that way is highly talented. It's easy to defend at a certain point, right? You
Well,
just
that's
park the
what
bus.
the Spanish national team became like so dogmatic to the point where they had like six like number eights basically,
Yeah, and then
and it
it
was
was
they had 800 passes and no shots on goal, and it was
and it
like
wasn't fun and it wasn't beautiful,
it
right? It
wasn't
was
fun. You're
just
right.
it was just pass it around the horn, right? Because they're gonna put 11 guys between you and the ball, and you're gonna pass it around those 11 guys. It's gonna go wing back to center to deep line the round, and we're just gonna do that for 90 minutes. That's possession, right?
Yep.
And it's short passing and it's rapid passing, but it's not beautiful.
Yep. It has to be in service of something.
Yes.
All right. Probably my favorite part of every one of these discussions. Who's the player that you hate the most? And it can be rational, it can be irrational. Like, I mean, if you're a Barca fan, it's totally rational to say Ronaldo is like the your most hated player. But I,
So
I like the ones where it's like, why does he hate that guy? That's interesting. So anyway,
mine's gonna be not that exciting and a little bit predictable, and it's not Ronaldo.
okay.
It's Mbappe.
Oh, interesting.
Um,
All right.
but it's for a very similar reason that at one point it was Ronaldo, and it's not the kit. It is because I do not believe because he doesn't counter press and because he doesn't smile when his teammates score.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
He doesn't, and you see it, and Ronaldo used to do it, and he certainly wasn't doing it when Portugal won the other night, but he used to, like, I saw plays where he had a goal and another player touched the ball, maybe unnecessarily, and
And
he
he
would
got
go pout,
upset. He got
right?
upset.
And
Yeah.
you're not, and what I will give Ronaldo that I do not believe either Vinny or Mbappe has is I think he had such a drive to win that he would still go counter press when he was younger, right? Like he would, if they were behind, not to the level. I'm sorry, not to the level of like
He would do empty calorie pressing. He would
he
he
would do.
would
Okay,
run around with his
but
head
I do believe he would
under his
try to
clothes.
take control of the match, right?
Yeah, he
Whereas
was trying to show.
I don't think Mbappe genuinely cares, and I think the fact that Griezmann's not on the French national team is,
Because
and the fact that it was very publicly kind of a I don't want to play with this player. Here's a guy who had a very legitimate chance at one more World Cup and decided not to and let it be known that it was because of the captain of the team. Like, come on.
I think Mbappe is a really interesting and complicated figure. I don't have a lot of antipathy toward him. I don't get like a rush watching him play like a lot of people do. He's incredibly talented. he does seem like he's reached that thing where he was so good so young, and it seemed to come so easily to him that I don't know if he has a gear beyond what he's developed now. Now, bear in mind that gear is 45 goals a year, which is puts him into
Mhm.
like rarefied air, right? But in the modern game, if you don't press, if you're not going to expend the same amount of energy as everybody else, then um, your team has to compensate for that in some way, and it can't just be that you score one more goal than they do. But yeah,
And,
I
and
mean,
and
that's a
let's
problem.
and let's also be honest. If you're and you saw this last year, if you are a middling number 9 and you are put on Real Madrid, we're going to spot you 20 goals, right? Because you could like there. It's not like yes, he's 40. Look, nobody. I'm not saying he's not talented, right? In any way, right? Or that he can't at any given moment probably beat any player on the pitch one on one.
Yeah,
But he got 45 goals at Real Madrid, right? Like
yeah.
there's plenty of there are plenty of guys who would get, you know, 8 goals on Everton who would get 20 on Real Madrid with all that service that you get and all of those other players around drawing players off of you.
I don't know. I'm not, like I said, he doesn't, I'm not a fan. I respect him. I think that Madrid team was so dysfunctional this past year in so many different ways.
Mhm.
For him to be able to score that many goals is somewhat of a feat, because you have a lot of guys who wanted their own numbers last year.
Mhm.
And that's
Yes.
not even all the dysfunction. The dysfunction was mostly positional, and like them playing their best in same type of spaces all
Having
over.
having 3 left forwards was not
Well,
was not
not
left
ideal.
wingers was
Not
not the
ideal.
best strategy.
How do you? Are you worried at all about Xabi Alonso and what he could maybe bring some order to the chaos?
Um, I think anybody who isn't worried about Real Madrid is stupid,
Yeah,
right?
true,
Like
true.
it's because what does it take? It takes to fix that team takes 1 or 2 moves, one of
Right,
which they already made,
right,
right? Like
right.
they needed a little bit more playmaking and solidity in the back, and they still need to solve the fact that they don't have that they are forcing a natural winger to play center forward, and that's hard. But if they can figure out a way to work around, like it's not again, we were talking about the most talented players in the world. It's not.
So they
It's
should be able to make it
it's a
work.
mental, and it's actually the reason that I don't like him. It's the mental side of the game, right? And I think that whole team, there is a fluid. You could have taken those same players on that same team and implemented a more fluid, less positional front where with some rotation and overlapping and players going to where the space is instead of everyone having to be on the left, and you could have made that work, right? But the
Well,
mentality,
like Luis Enrique did at PSG, where
yeah,
those
yeah,
guys were like,
yeah,
it was like a chorus of
yeah,
movement, and
yeah.
no one, hardly anyone except for Kvaratskhelia, can't I don't know if I
Good
pronounced
luck.
it right.
Thank you.
Kind of held a similar position the whole match. So, um, am I correct in saying Madrid is your most despised team?
It has to be.
Has
It's
to
a
be,
law.
right? Who else? Who else?
Who else? There really isn't. You know, I don't really have anyone else on that list. I would say I'm not enthralled with PSG, Man City, and Newcastle because I don't think that the foreign ownership and the sliding of money in through the sponsorships thing is right. So set that aside, or I mean that's like a batch, but it's not about a dispassion for the club. It's really more of a dispassion for UEFA and the way they allow things to
The
happen, right?
model
For
that
creating the environment where that model can happen is the
yeah.
problem to me. Because how do you begrudge them from doing it if you can do it, right?
Right.
And then other than that, like I mean, in Spain, I really enjoy watching almost every team. And in the other leagues, I'm gonna just be honest, I'm not educated enough to truly hate anyone else.
Hmm.
So
Okay. Like Madrid, is it just a pure like if you like the light, you have to hate the darkness, or is there something like particular that
No, I think for me, in addition to that, right? And obviously
is
that's
obviously
that's number one. But like the number two in is there is really a difference in philosophy um, between a team that grows players and a team that buys players. And one of the things I actually am happy about, and this is maybe a weird thing to be happy about, I'm glad that Barca struggled when they started spending too much money on players and
totally.
have been successful since they've been growing them again.
Yeah,
Um,
agreed.
because I don't like the super club thing, the Galacticos. Like it doesn't work for me, and it just doesn't like it's not the way I like to watch sports. And I grew up in the city of Rocky, right? And I'm never gonna root for Apollo Creed. Like it's just not who I am.
You know what's interesting is, Madrid, capital of Spain,
Right.
seat of power. There's always been this sort of like thing with Catalonia. Uh, it was obviously the golden age of the Spanish team. 08 through 2012 was like it was a mix of Madrid and Barca players, but it was definitely more Barca players, and the heart of that
Mhm.
midfield was Barca. This Spanish team is not as exposed to either of those clubs, but there's a lot of Barca players and there's almost zero Madrid players. The only Madrid player who actually was super meaningful to the team that won the Euros was Carvajal.
Mhm.
Um, Outside of that, they've just signed what's his name, Houston. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but he was bought. He's not like a Madrid academy
Mhm.
player. Outside of that, like there's no imprint on the Spanish national team from the capital club that dominates global football.
Yeah,
And there
because they buy
is
players.
pariahs in the Northeast who, want to be
And
in the
look, let's also, I don't want to be one of those people, and there's certainly a lot of them here in Barcelona who act as if Barcelona is some poor, struggling. It's the, it
Oh
is,
yeah.
it is still the club that has the best selling merchandise on the planet, and
Yeah.
we're within the top three,
Biggest stadium in the
biggest
world.
stadium, which
Yeah.
is getting bigger, and who every financial problem they had was self-inflicted.
Yes.
And has its own you know, levels of controversy that would be unacceptable to me if I was not a supporter, right? And the referee thing, which has never been really resolved, the paying off the refs, if that did or did not happen,
I'm not
or
gonna
the incredible politics that come into the fact that it's a fan run club in the elections, and you know, it just
that's
it's
just
not, or
the
the
masala
social
on top
media
of
team.
the dish.
Yeah,
Come on.
the social media team bad being known to like pull out vendettas against even players
Players.
way out the door. Like
Oh yeah.
that. Look, it's not as if this is like purity on one side and evil
Of
on the
course not.
other.
Of course not. That's what
But
makes
a lot of people behave like it is.
we're perfectly imperfect. Barca's perfectly imperfect.
Right.
That's what makes it. Um, what's your Mount Rushmore of players? So you
All right.
said
I'm
Sergio,
so
Sergio Roberto better not be on your Mount
He's not on
Rushmore.
my Mount Rushmore list.
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna caveat this one
Yeah.
because I came to the game late
Yep.
and I primarily watched the Spanish game.
Yep.
And I do a lot of reading and a lot of watching about all of these players that I have no business in world football coming up with a Mount Rushmore of world football. So I'm
Okay.
going to give you my Mount Rushmore of Spanish players since I have been watching Spanish
It's your
football.
Mount Rushmore. It's
That's
not the
what
definitive
I'm
Mount
just I'm
Rushmore.
just putting that caveat out there
Got you.
to cut off the hate mail before it starts. And I'm going to give you one by position, one by phase of play.
Okay.
Jan Oblak, I think, is the best keeper I've watched. Sergio Ramos is, I think, the defender I would put on the Mount Rushmore. I know that's
Oh my God.
sacrilege, and yeah, I can see it in your face, right? Xavi in the midfield,
Yeah.
Messi obviously, and Simeone as the coach.
Manager. I mean, over the last decade, you could not go wrong with that. That I actually should change this because Mount Rushmore doesn't really mean a lot to like international people. I should change
That's
it to
fair.
what's your five-a-side team. That's actually what I
Right.
should do. I
Right.
will change that from now on. But yeah. So do you have one other player you can throw into your five-a-side team?
One other player that I'm going to throw in my five-a-side team. Oh, man, that's because now you're asking me to not say Ronaldo, right? Which is tough, right?
Yeah, it's your team.
Oh,
If he's
oh.
uncoachable, he's uncoachable.
If he's uncoachable, I mean, if I'm gonna do a five-a-side team, yeah, I'm gonna put Busquets in there to
To
hold that
just
back together,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Like
imagine
just
all the drag backs and stuff he'd do in a five-a-side.
oh god, it would just be ridiculous. I want to give you some a Simeone. I don't know if this is that, but I was looking this up in preparation for this question. So in the essentially the 15 years prior to him. So they won the league in 1995. They had one top four finish, I think it is, or two top four finishes until he came into the team. And they have had one fourth place since. Everything else has been top three. So this
Oh,
whole
he's been
there's
amazing.
three teams in Spain that anyone who's 14 years old is like, oh, there's three teams in Spain, and then everyone else without him, there's still two teams in Spain and everyone
Oh,
else,
no
and
question.
they're not as good as Sevilla and Valencia before. And we get into Peter Lim, but that tier of teams, right?
I mean,
Like,
when I first started watching the Spanish league, it was Valencia was the third team. So,
yeah.
and Atleti was in a down period. So yeah, completely
I mean,
he's
they were
completely
relegated,
changed. Yeah, he's
so
completely changed that their perch, not just in Spain, but globally for sure. For
yeah.
sure. Um, yeah, okay. Well, interesting. I would, it's your Mount Rushmore, but Sergio Ramos, I am not one of those people who instinctively hates him. I think actually he's been an amazing player and he did amazing things for the Spanish national team. Uh, but I wouldn't. I think his ability is a bit overrated, especially at center back. I actually think his best position was when he was a right back. But
I don't necessarily even think you're wrong. One of the things that's important to me, right? Because when it was my Mount Rushmore, not my five-a-side team,
yeah,
right? You moved the goalposts on me,
I
maybe
did
a little
miss the
there,
goalpost. Yeah,
right? But is that's a guy you want in a dogfight, right?
I guess that's true. That's
Like
true.
he's a
I mean,
guy.
he had a knack for winning.
I have
He
this
had a knack
thing.
for winning.
Who are the players on the team you hate the most that you would sign immediately
Yeah.
if they were available? He's on that list, right?
Oh, for me, it's
Casemiro was on that list for
oh
me.
my god, I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. I don't care if he would help me win. He's the dark arts specialist. There's no way.
Right, but I don't hate that.
Yeah, I would take like the current team. There's a bunch of players I absolutely detest on Madrid, but I love Fetty. Fetty, I would take every
Yeah,
day of the
without a
week.
doubt,
What
without a
a
doubt.
what a player, and what a like just an awesome player. I wish he came to Barca at the beginning. He'd have been a legend. But
Fair.
um, let's look back at the season. So like I think most people at this point in 2024, obviously 0.0% would have said that they would have won a domestic treble, beaten Madrid 4 times, and almost got to the Champions League final. Like that was not a plausible scenario
No,
for the next 12 months. So bearing that in mind, like what were your expectations of Hansi Flick, of like a team that really had no budget, was in total disarray, could barely register their players, to where they are now, which is like seemingly on the verge of another sort of like homegrown renaissance.
I mean at the beginning of the season, I would have said this team is going to finish somewhere between third and seventh. Like that, it could have collapsed,
For
right?
sure.
That we
Sure.
could have gone. We could have looked at it and gone. Xavi was right all along, and bringing somebody else in made it worse, right?
Yep.
I mean, I had incredible faith in the young players, but
Yep.
that doesn't necessarily translate to product on the field cohesively, right? And but I will say, kind of from the beginning of the season, even though it didn't, it started, it was hot and then it was cold and then it was hot for the rest of the time. Even during the cold, I was like, they're doing the right things, and you could see them playing consistently in the right way.
Yeah,
I mean, the season was incredible, and it was, and I
exhilarating,
don't, and even, I mean, even losing in the Champions League the way they lost was
legendary.
exhilarating, and to a team and to a quality team, right? Not to that wasn't a a 7-1 flame out, or the multiple uh you know go up 4-1 and draw, like
Yeah,
it wasn't that, it
come
was,
from ahead to lose kind of
yeah,
scenario.
come from ahead to lose thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't even know what to say about the season except for just talk about getting the most out of a team as a collective unit, and getting guys. I think the thing that impressed me the most of all, besides Lamine Yamal's just unbelievable talent, right? Which is just viscerally impressive, was the fact that a year ago, now I guess now almost two, Kunde was upset that he was being pushed out to the right, and Flick came in and did whatever had to be done behind the scenes to make him into a team player,
Yeah.
in the way that he was then able to have fun playing the game, and use his talents in a way that was appropriate, and play out on the right, like,
Yeah.
that's the people management, that's the man management,
Oh,
right?
Flick is, if nothing else, proven himself to be amazing man manager. So a couple things on
Yeah.
the Kunde thing. I think one thing that helped me kind of conceptualize how this team works is in the golden era, you had Danny Alves, who basically wanted to spend as little time in his own half as possible as
Mhm.
a quote unquote defender, but essentially was just playing games with Messi and whoever else was on the right at that time. But that meant everything was tilted that side attacking. That meant you needed someone at left back who could sit and felt comfortable sitting, essentially almost like a left-sided center back.
Yeah.
The way the team was set up this year with Balde playing that sort of Alves role, but on the left, you needed that right back to support the attack, but most of all, you needed that solidity in the back, and so that you didn't have two flying fullbacks the whole time. You couldn't play the way they did if both the fullbacks wanted to push up at every single opportunity. So, and
Yeah.
Yamal was good enough that he often didn't even need someone overlapping around him because he could just take two people on and beat them anyway. So,
Yeah. And they also had enough holding midfield talent to
well,
cover for when they did both get up. It wasn't,
yeah,
and you had, Inigo Martinez playing like the best year
out
of
of his
his
mind,
career,
out of his
right?
mind.
Like he won't repeat that
Yeah,
quality
and they
ever
can't they
again.
can't come back from two goals 8 different times this year. That's
No,
just
no,
not.
no. I mean, but the this the and then we talked about Pedri, right? And just the
My
work in
spirit, my
ball
spirit
coverage, and
animal.
yeah. So like, it just talk about a functioning unit more than any individual player,
So,
including Yamal.
okay, so the beginning of the season, let's cast our mind back because everything
Mhm.
seems like such a blur. De Jong has some mystery ailment, out indefinitely, no timetable for when he's returning. It was some muscle issue. He
Mhm.
doesn't come back till November. Gavi is returning from a ACL tear. I forget exactly when he came back, but he came back at some point end of
Towards the
last
middle.
year, or was it this year?
It was this year.
It
It
was this
was
year.
it
Okay.
was he They eased him in a little bit in the fall, and then it wasn't really till the winter that he was playing
Yeah.
regularly.
I was trying to remember the timeline of
Yeah.
that. Pedri, generational talent, but had had 2 consecutive years of like could not stay healthy for more than 2-3 matches,
No.
stemming from that year where he was played an ungodly amount of minutes. Going back to your
Right.
kid player should only play a certain amount of time. Sorry, my dog is going nuts in the background. I hope it's not joining the conversation. But so you had that. Then so they end up playing these youngsters, Mark Casado and Mark Bernal, in the first few
Mhm.
matches.
Kubarsi.
Barca, yeah, and
Kubarsi.
Bernal, and
Pau
Kubarsi. No, I'm
Kubarsi. The
saying in
three of
midfield.
them. Yeah.
I'm saying in midfield.
Oh, in midfield.
So
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha. Yeah.
so Bernal looks like a player, like an amazing player.
Right.
2 games in, he gets hurt, blows out his knee. That scenario to me, the fact that Flick was able to keep Pedri healthy and play him virtually in every match this year, and somehow paper over the fact that his desired midfield was gone. Oh, and they sold Gundogan. They let Gundogan go. Like amidst all this, they're like, "Hey, here's an able-bodied guy who knows how to play the game, and you're just letting him walk." And the fact that that gamble, more than anything else, the fact that that gamble paid off, and that Pedri stayed healthy and became the best midfielder in the world that we know he is when he's healthy, to me was it was genius, but all genius has, you're right on the line of madness. And I think he was
Well,
mad. It could have gone if Lewandowski gets hurt and doesn't score 20 goals before Thanksgiving. And so there's one other injury. Pedri breaks down again. You're right. They're probably happy to be 7th place, right? I mean, the whole thing could falls apart.
I mean, and it's one of those, like, at this level of football, every team's sort of on that knife's edge
That's
most of the
true.
time,
That is true.
right? I mean, like, I think you could go through almost any team in Europe and say a couple of injuries here and there, right? And what's, what happens to them, and and there's probably 4 or 5 teams that did have those injuries that should have been there, in different leagues. Um, I still don't know what happened to Man City, right? Like, things just go wacky sometimes and all these things. But the the thing the thing was that through all of that, like, the tactical adjustments, and they did not play the same way. It wasn't like this, like, depending on the 11 players that were on the pitch, they did play differently with different 11 players on the pitch. Like, the coach did not. I mean, there was
Aside
always
from the high line, obviously, but
right.
yeah,
Well, there's a system, right, and the system has a high line, but you would see, like, okay, Pedri's going to be playing sort of up this, but when we're going to have a little bit more of a double pivot today, and he's going to come back, and when
Rafinha
Gavi's
plays
out
more
there,
centrally when
you know,
Balde's there,
you
and he
know,
plays wider when he's not. And yeah.
right, and when Danny Alma was playing in the attacking mid, then Rafinha stayed super wide. But when he wasn't on the pitch and Balde was overlapping, sometimes you saw Rafinha standing right next to Lewandowski, right? Like,
Yeah.
that was the you know. So again, it's very hard for anybody who's a Barca supporter to say anything bad about Xavi, and it's not personal, right? I feel like it's hard, but,
Maybe
like,
he's too close.
it was almost like he was experimenting on the pitch with the players, and they didn't know what to do. Whereas I felt like these players had clear instructions, like, go out and, like, back to the football manager thing, like, you are playing deep lying playmaker on defend today, and tomorrow I'm going to put you out there on attacking midfielder on support. But right now you're playing this, and it's not going to change 4 times in this match. So I felt like that's a very good thing.
Flick has how many years of experience?
Yeah,
Xavi is still young, and I mean, aren't you a better, like, leader and communicator than you were 20 years ago?
Mostly.
15 years ago? Mostly.
So.
Mostly.
Sometimes on my good days.
What are your expectations for next year? So Madrid they've already invested a lot. They just bought some wonder kid from River Plate. And then we've got a goalkeeper. We stole Espanyol's goalkeeper.
Mm-hmm.
I should say I'm saying we. Barca
legally purchased
a goalkeeper. Legally purchased another human being from another entity. So, maybe for the first time, definitely in like 8 years, maybe since, I don't know, the turn of the century, Barca have like a potential, like, top 3 goalkeeper in the world, top 5 goalkeeper in the world. That's the ceiling for this guy, evidently. So what else, where else do they need to invest?
Look, they need the same thing that every team in the world needs. depth on the
Yeah,
depth at wing back, right, on both sides. Like, and I don't know that there's a team anywhere in the world that's like, I'm satisfied with my second right back and my
I
second
have
left
two.
back,
Yeah, I have two left
right?
backs.
I have two left backs and two right backs that I
They're
love
both
and that are
amazing,
interchangeable.
and they're
Like,
fine. And they're fine not being the starter every game.
right, exactly, right? Or I have this fluid six players that I run across the back, and all of them are wonderful. That's the weak spot, right? And that's what they saw towards the end of the season. That's what they saw in the Champions League. If you don't have Koundé, you don't have Balde. Like, there's to pull out the domestic wins and get where they got with the injuries they did have towards the end of the season is insane in the first place. But that depth is a problem. I think the whole back line, you had guys playing out of their minds quality this last year, and I expect some sort of letdown there. Like, that
Regression.
just doesn't. You got to regress to the mean a little bit.
I mean,
You know,
Kubarsi could improve. I mean,
he could
he's
improve.
on a upward trajectory. So
But also you've now got an entire summer of all the other teams looking at tape for a whole summer, right? Like, they're gonna find some
right,
spots in that,
right.
and
Yeah,
I
maybe like a
don't.
deep runner instead of having your most forward person try to beat the offside trap. Maybe like a deep runner. I felt like people started to
There
identify
was a
that.
diagonal deep runner thing that was working.
Yeah,
Um, and these things like, what happens when all these players are healthy and they all expect playing time? Like, that could be a challenge next year, right? If that these guys, that you have a little bit of that going on.
yeah,
God, do I hope they do not over purchase on the front line and put themselves in that position,
yeah.
right? Like I don't know what you do if you sign Nico Williams. Like, first of all, I don't think he's the right player. I don't think he's the right style player
I
for
agree.
his
I don't
physical
think he's
talent,
right
and
either.
it's also why I don't think they should, like, think they had this problem with Griezmann as well. Incredibly talented player, but not the right player for the system.
Yeah,
And I love Nico, and I think he's an amazing player, and I love what he does for the national team. But I don't know what he's going to. I don't know that he's going to bring the thing that the team needs, because I don't think the team needs this galloping, high speed winger. It's not the game they play. And I
but
do
they do
worry
need
about the I
someone.
do worry about the front office.
You can't count on Rafinha and Yamal playing 58
No, no, no,
matches
no, no,
every.
certainly not. But I think that's the kind of money where sometimes you can buy two players. And I know he doesn't have the most insane release fee clause, but like,
His salary demands are high, evidently.
yeah, and just, you know, there are other teams in Spain who will jam a bunch of players in at the same position because they're the best players on the board. We've covered that, and I hope they don't do that. But again, depth, depth on the back line is important.
Yeah,
And if you have a solid back line and world class players at every other position, you're going to be okay. But if you look at them a couple years ago when PK was too slow to when they got beat on the trap, it was awful.
it was not
Right?
fun.
Yeah,
Between him and Busquets, it was like, are these
yeah,
guys? Did someone put concrete shoes on these guys? What's going on
yeah.
here? All right. Well, let's end with maybe a bit of sacrilege. Do you see a likely path for Yamal to be better than you know who? I'm not even talking like stats. To me, stats are stupid and meaningless, and for people who don't like actually love the game. I'm talking about watching with your eyes, observing the impact. It's very clear he's better and has had a bigger impact across the board than Messi did at the same age. But now the challenge is do it for the next 20 years.
Okay. First of all, statistically, no. Like, statistically, in the sense of, like, the odds of that happening to anyone, including Messi, are nearly zero. Like, the
Right.
odds of that career
Sure.
happening the way it did, right?
Right.
And being in a situation with the right coaches and the right players and the right club, and
Have the right
the
mentality for the
injuries, and the real lack of
injuries.
injuries, and all of those things coming together to build a career like that, versus all of the guys who have the talent and that just doesn't happen to them, or they're just not that lucky, is unfair to put that on anyone, and I
Sure.
certainly wouldn't put it on a 17-year-old. Um, and I also think there's a thing that somebody said in an interview one time. I don't remember who it was a teammate of Messi's, that said, no matter what position on the field you put him on, he would have been the best player,
Right.
right? That like his not just his instinctual ball control and his passing, but just his like pure understanding of what was going on around him. And the only athlete in any sport that I could compare this to was Wayne Gretzky, who, has created, at least in the US and Canada, the cliche, I go where the puck's going to be,
Yeah.
right? Because he knew where the puck was going to be all the time.
Yep.
And I don't know that Lamine is going to be that. He may be that. I mean, he certainly, when he has the ball in his feet, you can see the instinct that he knows where the ball needs to be on the pitch to make the pass, which is to me always more impressive than being able to put the ball in the net.
For
Is
sure.
and that thing he does with the outside of his left foot to make those passes that seem to defy physics is amazing to watch. And he's 17 years old, and there were people having this conversation about Ansu Fati a couple years ago, right?
We
And
watched we watched the match where he scored 2 goals.
right.
He was
So
the next.
like, I love the kid, and I walk around Barcelona, and 9 out of 10 shirts you see are
Yeah.
Yamal at this point, and my son who's 16, who never has watched a sport in his life. We move here and he sits down and he watches you all play, and he's suddenly wants to watch every match with us because the kid's that electric that even someone who doesn't like sports at all
Yeah.
wants to watch Lamine Yamal. Like, that's amazing. And everything in me wants this kid to be successful. And as a dad of a teenager, I cannot
Imagine.
participate, but I
Yeah.
cannot I cannot participate in adding to the pressure that this kid has, even on a
Yeah.
podcast he will never listen to. No offense.
You never
Um,
know. You never know.
right. Come back to this someday. They'll come back to this one.
Yeah.
But like, it's not fair to the player. It's
Yeah.
not fair to the team. It's not fair to the coach. And this kid needs to develop into that all around player who can own a game when he's not touching the ball, which is something Messi could do. Messi could draw the defenses out of position. He could, just do things, or just single-handedly take over a game in the midfield where he would just decide to drop back and just be a midfielder for
Like
15,
Pirlo.
20
He would be
minutes.
like Pirlo
Yeah,
for a
like
bit.
like
Yeah.
just
No, agreed.
I don't think it's fair, or that I don't think Yamal's anywhere near that yet. And he's 17 years old. So ask me in 4 years. Right?
Well, yeah, I mean, this goes back to our memories of Messi are, evolved with the way he is evolved as a player.
Mhm.
At this age, 17 to 20, he just wanted to get the ball at any position and beat 8
Mhm.
people, play one
Yeah.
twos, and he didn't have the spatial, like, I mean, he had it, but he hadn't developed a spatial sort of like awareness. And then he morphs into the guy who collects the ball at the halfway line and plays that ball into space for David Villa or Jordi Alba or who was ever out there. And it was like, oh, now he can just ping curled 40-yard
Yeah.
passes at will to someone's foot. Yamal, the next phase, and I'm not saying I don't think this happens next year. This probably happens in 3 years. Yamal's next phase is, can he play centrally and have more of like a roving position like he is for Spain? Actually, he removes more for Spain than he did for Barca.
Mhm.
But and if he thrives in that and he grows his game in that, then I think all bets are off, because he's certainly, he's taller and more athletic than Messi was, um,
Mhm.
or is. Um, but if he just ends up being like one of the best ever right wingers, and electric for his whole career and scores bags of goals, but he never influences games from the way that Messi did, dropping deep, playing as a center forward, playing, virtually wherever he wanted. It'll never be the same. But
and by all means, I hope he does, and I can see how he could.
Yeah, for
as
sure.
much as any player in the world right now, right?
Yep.
And
you're right, though. You said the coach, right? The coach is going to matter because Flick is not going to coach him. Flick's probably going to coach him 2-3 more years at the most if everything goes really well. And then the coach after that, the manager after that, the mister after that is going to matter more probably than anybody else in his development. Because if that manager decides I win if he stays on the right and I kind of keep him in a little cage developmentally, then he ends up being a world-class elite player, but he maybe doesn't go down in history more than he already has at his age. If it's some forward-thinking manager who we don't even know exists yet, who comes up with some revolutionary way to use him, that just unlocks all this stuff. So
reinvent the false nine or something.
Wait, whatever that next evolution is.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So I agree with you entirely that, and it's the same as what I was saying about Griezmann. The player and the system both matter.
Yeah.
And you can have a amazing player in the wrong system, and it doesn't work.
The game is littered with examples of average players in the perfect system and incredible players in the wrong system. So, what's the best way for people to reach you if they want to talk about chain or football? What it might be both.
LinkedIn's the easy spot. I'm pretty much off the rest of the socials at this point, but I'm always happy to get on LinkedIn, and then we can all dive into WhatsApp and yell at each other about football.
That sounds very healthy. So I wish I was so healthy, but I'm not yet. So Brian, thanks so much for joining. This has been as amazing as I knew it would be. So appreciate it. And
thank you for having me.
What is the shirt, in case anybody's
wondering? Guatemala. I got this on a trip with my son. We went to Guatemala for do some service work for there's a wonderful organization down there called Godchild that helps with indigenous Mayan families, building them houses in some of the deepest poverty you could ever see in the world. And this was my little souvenir from the trip, was pulling out a Guatemala kit.
That's awesome. Well, I'm in the DC area, so you see the Guatemala kit, every so often.
More than most.
More than most. So yeah. Awesome conversation. We'll talk soon. All right.
Thank you.
All right.